President and founder of QuickWrite. Ben?
Thanks, Brooke. Welcome, everyone. So I'm Ben Mazza, and I'm going to be your host today. We're also going to have a recorded version of today's session available for everyone. We'll notify you afterwards about where you can pick that up. We have a pretty wide audience today. Looks like we have some private equity firms, some folks who are representing venture capital firms, real estate fund managers. So we're going to be nimble today, and I'll try and address some of the more specific things to each group. We only have a couple of PowerPoint slides here. You're looking at one of them, and then we're going to jump right into the product. So what are we going to look at today? We're going to look at a product called QuickWrite, which is about portfolio monitoring and analysis, and it's a product that is built on Intuit's QuickBase, and in a few moments we're going to talk about Intuit and QuickBase to make sure everyone is on the same page. And to make sure you're in the right location, if you represent a venture capital, private equity, or other firm that invests in private company, you're in a good location for the next 40 minutes. We're going to be taking a look at an online platform that will help you better collect, analyze, and exchange portfolio performance information. And lots of benefits, but one in particular is about, reducing the manual and error-prone assembly of portfolio data. And that way everybody in your office can be on the same page, working from a single source. And about myself, real quick, spent 12 years working with private equity, venture capital, and real estate fund managers on improving their operations and reporting. And today's product, like I mentioned, is on Intuit's QuickBase. Some of you might be familiar with Intuit because maybe you do your management firm accounting in QuickBooks, but I'm going to transition back to the folks at Intuit. We'll cover 3 short slides, and then we're going to jump into the product. Okay. It sounds like Brooke might be on mute, so I'm going to take this one. You're probably familiar with Intuit and some of their big products, Quicken, QuickBase, Mint, and TurboTax. This is a large firm, 8,500 employees. I think for the better part of a decade, one of America's most admired, software companies. They spent 14 some odd years delivering software as a service solutions, and actually this QuickBase product that you're going to see today, it's all online, a software as a service product. There's about 5,000 QuickBase clients out there, and I think somewhere around 500,000 users with some 3 million apps that are available in the platform, and that's something that we're seeing today. This QuickWrite product is a custom QuickBase solution. It's one of many apps that you could use.
Hi, Ben. It's Dee.
Thanks, Dee.
Sorry for that, for the transition. So my name is Dee Fleming, and I'm the Channel Sales Manager, and I've been working with Ben Mazza for some time. So just to continue with what Ben had mentioned, you probably are quite familiar with the Intuit Corporation, and in particular, for those of attendees in the U.S., we are a company that supports the tax initiatives and provides tax accounting software to many, many citizens in the U.S. And beyond that, the other products that you may be familiar with, in particular with QuickBooks. But in terms of our clients, it may surprise some of you to know that we work not only in that SMB space, but work also with large enterprise clients. So customers such as Tesla, P&G, eBay, Google, they rely on QuickBase for many of their mission-critical business applications. And so we do service a very broad spectrum of companies, both in size and scope. And on the next slide, you can see that the areas that these clients are using QuickBase in really runs a very broad gamut. So Ben's going to be very, very focused on the assets and fund management today. But please know that one of our advantages for this SaaS platform is that while you may be using it to solve this particular challenge and solution today, There are many, many other options which can solidify the value and give you a greater return on your investment. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Ben, and I'm really excited to see more about your application, Ben.
Excellent. Thank you, Dee. So from an agenda standpoint, we're going to cover first product presentation. It should take about 15 to 20 minutes. And then after that, for those who are kind of on the ground floor of a fund manager and they're doing the day-to-day work, I think you'll really appreciate the following 15 minutes after the presentation. We're going to take a look at day-to-day tasks, things like uploading data, creating new fields, even doing some basic math, and how do we do some analysis, with the data. So I think if you stick around for the next 30, 45 minutes, you're really going to appreciate what you see. So with that in mind, let's jump into the product. I have it here on the web, and I've logged into the product, and I've landed on my dashboard. And I want to stress that theme of kind of my dashboard because all of your data will be in one central location. Each person can have kind of a personalized view, all working from the same source. So my personalized view might be very different than somebody else's. And if you work on a deal team where your group of people manage a certain group of companies, you could see things very differently than maybe the partners of the firm and so on. But since you're all working from one single source, you don't have to worry that somehow the integrity of the data is going to change the way it might in a spreadsheet if you start inserting fields and stuff. So as I look at my dashboard here, I have charts, I have maps, all the charts and such, even on the dashboard, are interactive. So I have here portfolio companies and revenue over time, and I could select these and the charts will rebuild themselves as I select the information. As I scroll down, there might be other information I want to track on my dashboard. Things like EBITDA over time over certain portfolio companies. And for those who are venture capitalists on the line today, you might be saying to yourself, hey, we work with some pre-revenue folks. There's no EBITDA. There's no revenue. And I'm going to show a software as a service company in that example today. And they might have things like paying to sign up comparisons and other types of charts. But it doesn't need to be charts. It could be data grids like these that look more like Excel. And in this case, this is my financing report for the companies that I follow, the portfolio companies where we deployed on seed, Series A and B, and so on. So these dashboards are customized to each person. And one of the themes that I also want to add in is kind of this theme of do-it-yourself, no IT support with this application. So if I want to build my own dashboard, you don't have to call somebody up in your department or IT or even us. There's a little button here that says customize this page. I'm just going to show that briefly because it's something that I think everyone can relate to about ease of use. So here is my dashboard, and if I don't want this chart, there's a little trash can there to get rid of the chart. I can move things around, and as I move things around, it'll regrow and move them. So if I want to see this chart across the entire page, I could. If I want to see my map, if I was a real estate firm and I have a lot of geographic locations, I could do that. And any chart that I have in the software, I could pick from my list here of all the charts. So real easy to build, put your own buttons on the page, and more. And I wanted to stress that theme throughout today's presentation about kind of ease of use and no IT support. So we have charts, we have graphs of portfolio companies. Well, where are the portfolio companies? Where does it come from? There's an area in here called portfolio management, and I'm going to select that. And I have here on the page a list of portfolio companies that I have access to. Now, if you were a venture capital firm and maybe you have 40 or 50 portfolio companies, you could have these nice filters here on the left-hand side, And you can filter by things like industries or segments, what stage of investment, dates, and you'll determine what the filters are that best match the way you run your business. Same thing for this type of report about kind of stressing the personalization here. You could determine what the columns are going to be, the order that it's going to appear in, and even things like icons and pictures and more. There's two portfolio companies I'm going to focus on today to kind of address the diverse audience. So we have some private equity folks who maybe might be working with more later stage and mature portfolio companies. And then we might have some venture capital firms who feel that, hey, we have some pre-revenue companies. What would that look like? So I'm going to first go into this company called Oil Shale Lease Management. I'm going to click on their logo, and I'm immediately brought to the profile page for this company. And these profile pages are to give you a shot in the arm of all the information that you want to see about the portfolio company. And I think for those who are on the call today are probably familiar with, there's always more information. Now, it might not be the most important information, but the profile page is to get you the key information that you want. So in this case, what fund we've invested it in, the first investment date, how much money has gone in, and that's a link to our financing metrics. We're going to go there soon, and it'll show us kind of the investment over time, who's in charge, our original investment thesis. And as I scroll down the page here, I come to a report, and it's a performance report showing operating metrics against our targets or budget. So for example, this was at purchase, the metrics, the latest period, which is 2 years later, the target metrics that we have set out or the budget, and what's the difference between that budget and the latest period. And red means they're off target and green means they're on target. Now, the key performance indicators that we're looking at here, there's usually a lot more. But this is kind of the shot in the arm that you would want, and you would have this set up for you, of the key performance indicators you want to look at quickly. Now, there's always more key performance indicators, gross margins, operating margins, EBITDA, head count, and more, valuation, and changes over time. So the folks who are venture capital firms might say, well, hey, we have firms with no EBITDA, no revenue, pre-revenue. What do these pages look like? Are they all the same? And they could actually be all different. So I'm going to go to the top. I'm going to hit my little arrow here, bounces me to the top. Nice, easy navigation on that. I'll go back to my list of portfolio companies, and I'm going to pick a software as a service firm, so I can see that over here, software as a service in Fund 3. I'm going to click on it, and as I scroll down the page here, the key performance indicators or the metrics are very different. It has to do with how many customers, monthly reoccurring revenue at the beginning of the month, month-over-month growth in MRR, time to recover the cost of acquisition, and so on. So similarly, visitors versus, sign-ups. And I wanted to show this to just stress that if you are making investments in different kinds of portfolio companies and you're judging them differently, you could also have those metrics here that show differently. So it's not homogeneous, these types of reports. And similarly, I mentioned these profile pages are a shot in the arm. We have charts embedded on the profile pages. Later we're going to see a whole analysis tool set that maintains all of our data, and we could do all of our charting. But these might be the charts you care about the most. And similarly, all of these are interactive. You click on them, and they'll regrow the data. And in this case, I could see the churn for this software company versus account expansions. Might look at sign-ups versus paying, and maybe look at how the valuation has changed over time. I'm going to go back to that other portfolio company. And I'll stress this one last time, how each portfolio company can be judged by different metrics. So I'm going to pick it over here. And let's take a look at the charts that we feel matter the most for this type of company. Well, in this case, it's EBITDA over time. It's their revenue, so very different than that software firm. Valuation usually matters to many firms. In this case, we could see it change over time. And all of these are interactive. You could drill down on the data, and it'll show you the underlying data behind it. For the private equity folks, where you do have to keep public market comps, in this case, Schlumberger, I have here, over time, we're maintaining EBITDA, EBIT, and revenue, and you could store an endless amount of data on those public comps. So maybe for that software firm, there's none, and that section in the page, there won't be anything in there. So public market comps, Halliburton, Baker Hughes, there's geographic mapping for the company, there's more information about the portfolio, there's documents, and then there's kind of the product library. I wanted to show these two and kind of have the trail end here on this profile of this one company to reinforce that theme of one central location. So for those on the line today, if you could just imagine, you probably have Dropbox or maybe a shared network drive, and you have your documents over there. And then you might have those spreadsheets separate, and then the board meeting notes, which no one ever gives to the deal associate. It always seems they can't get their hands on that, even if they request. And then you have the data, the spreadsheets, the analysis. You might have PowerPoint decks with the pictures of the products and so on. If you imagine your own office, they're probably in many sheets or many different documents or in many different locations. But in here, we have our documents, even with commentary, with our product, with our data, with our comps, with our analysis, with our key performance indicators, and it's all in one central location. So a very different world when it's all here compared to maybe the way you have it today, where you're kind of assembling data. You won't be assembling, you'll be analyzing, and then hopefully that'll lead to some savings in time. And I know how hard the deal team works and the finance team works, and any amount of time saved is kind of a big one at the end of the month. So I mentioned that this is a shot in the arm and that these might be metrics I like to follow the most. So there needs to be an area dedicated to all the data and kind of analyzing it. So we have up here an area called Analyze Portfolio, and I'm going to click on it. And we have lots of data. So there could be a wealth of information that you're maintaining on a portfolio company, but what do you do with it? Well, we create reports, and then we do charts and analysis. So I have up here an area that's called Reports and Charts. And I'm going to select it, and it sprouts a menu. And I have here all of my reports and charts related to my software services portfolio. It doesn't need to be organized that way. It could be individual portfolio companies. It could be across portfolio, across industries. And what I like to stress about this is because it's all in one central location, if I go across, even the folks in investor relations and accounting can have their own reports. So, currently today, if you're doing that in spreadsheets, you're creating lots of spreadsheets and you're juggling lots of spreadsheets and reports because every department has their own sheets. And the accounting folks, maybe they only want the valuation data and such and when it changed. And investor relations, maybe they want talking points and some key indicators. They could carve out their own reports, and you don't have to worry about any erosion of the data because someone has a multiple copy or someone inserted a row into a spreadsheet and ruined it for you. Let's take a look at some of the reports here real quick. So time series reports, so all that data, we want to kind of see trends that are in here. Once again, the charts are all interactive. Click, it grows and regrows, and you could add companies in to see how they perform over time. Could be individual companies. If I go back to that software as a service company, and I could see here monthly reoccurring revenue and how it's growing, but if I come down here and reanalyze it and pull out and now look at the expansions versus the churn, and I could see here, churn, is heading in a certain direction, but when I add back in account expansions and, new customers, suddenly things look a little different. So it's a lot easier to analyze in an application like this than it would be in Excel, because every time you touch Excel to do something like that, the concern is you might be altering the data in some way, but not in this application. There are reports in here that are not charts, for example. So somebody might say, well, just show me the energy portfolio with the latest data, not a chart, but looks like Excel. And we're all comfortable with Excel. So I wanted to show these Excel-like reports of certain portfolio companies and certain data. And you'll customize these columns here. It'll have your words, it'll be in your order, and of course it'll be your data. Now, this is kind of the operating metrics for the portfolio company. What about the financing metrics for the portfolio company? So there's a financing metrics over here. I think the folks on the line who are venture capitalists might appreciate this. Every portfolio company, I'll scroll down the page here, what fund they're in, what round we went in on, what was the number of shares, the amount invested, pre-money, post-money valuation. And what's nice about this is the data is tied to the portfolio company. That round of investment is tied to documents in our document library. So everything here is connected in one spot. Now, I was showing this application to an associate, and he says, he stays late running these crazy reports for the partners, and the partners always seem to ask for it at 6 o'clock at night when they want to get out. I wanted to show you an example about time savings here. He gave me this example. The partner walked in and said, hey, show me all the portfolio companies where we did an A round, and we followed it up with a B round, and what was the valuation at the end of that B round? And the guy told me he sweated it out all night creating that. I'm going to do that here in 2 clicks. I go to my filters on the left-hand side here, and I pick Series A, Series B. So that's where we did Series A and Series B. We only want it in Fund 2 and not across every fund, and there it is, 2 companies. We did a Series A and a Series B, and we followed it up with post-money valuation here and here. Now they had their analogy in place, and something like that across multiple spreadsheets kept that person in the office all night. But here, you're not assembling data, you're analyzing data, and these filters work really beautifully here. I do want to show one more report about financing to connect some dots for folks. So I'm going to go back up here, and I have a different set of reports and charts for financing. There's one called Remaining to be Invested. I'm going to close my filter. And in here is a running tally over time, so my portfolio companies over time, and how much money was invested, and then an aggregate showing the total amount that we have invested in the fund. And here is the size of the fund. So it's a big fund, almost $1.4 billion. And the remaining to be invested is decreasing over time as money is being deployed for investments. And it keeps that running tally for me as I scroll down the page. Isn't that nice how the heading kind of maintains itself up there. I like how that's done. The running tally, we invested $361 million, and we have $1 billion left to be invested. So it keeps track of that for me. And you might ask, well, hey, if it's keeping track of the size of the fund, where is that coming from to make sure that everything is connected here and in harmony? So there has to be an area dedicated to funds. And up here, we have a button called Funds. So I'm going to click that, and I see my funds here. I have a Delaware vehicle. That's where most of the money is. There's a co-invest plan, maybe for the employees of the firm, and Cayman blocker, and so on. If I click that, so I click the little eyeball to view, I click a pencil to edit. I'll click the eyeball to view, and I have here my total commitment for the fund. Where did that total come from? Well, if I scroll down, it came from the investors who have commitments and sharing percentages and more. So I wanted to stress how everything is connected here. We have our fund. The fund's total commitment is being reduced in our area called financing metrics as we're making investments. Those financing metrics are tied to the portfolio companies, and we use Analyze Portfolio to analyze all the data and create reports from it. Additionally, if we want to look at a particular investor, we could click on an investor, so I'm going to click on an investor here, and then there's profile data about that investor, tax information, other kinds of properties, and more. So everything here has been tied together in one central location, and that way everyone's on the same page. So you could go into your area for Analyze Portfolio, create all the analysis, all the charts you want, all the graphs, and you have enormous integrity with the data because you're not changing the data, you're doing your analysis from it. And Intuit has very robust permissioning and security around the application. So you can restrict people to certain data, whether they have read-only permissions. So maybe you give the partner of the firm read-only permission, and maybe the financing folks, the deal associates, and others who need to get their hands on the keyboard, the ability to change the data that's here. So we've looked at everything, and we've kind of clicked around. But what about doing? What about the day-to-day tasks? So I'm going to do a little transition here from kind of showing what the product looks like to actually doing some of the work. So I'm going to cover things like loading data, editing. I'm going to do a little math the way you might in Microsoft Excel, and we'll create a chart. So I mentioned the word Microsoft Excel, and I want to use some analogies here. I have Excel opened up down here. I'm just going to bring it up. We eat, live, and breathe. We all live inside of Microsoft Excel. And I want to do a little analogy for you here. In Excel, if I want to make a change to the data, I just stick my cursor in, and I type a change to the data, and it takes care of it. I want to make that same analogy in the product. So I come over here, I have my data, I click Grid Edit, I stick my cursor in, and I do a change. Stick my cursor in, and I can make a change. It even has the same properties of copying and pasting down, filling down, copying rows, and so on. So I think that's really nice. We have all become comfortable with Excel and how things work in Excel, and it would be nice if the software did a lot of the same, but added also the integrity around the data. So I wanted to show that as an example. I also want to show how does data get in here? So we have a lot of data in here. Nobody wants to type all this data. It would be way too much. So we need ways for data to get in. And one of the ways is to mass load data from Excel, for example. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to go over here and click More, and we're going to click Import, Export. So I'm going to pick that. And I have options to import data into the software. I could do it from a file. A file would be Microsoft Excel. Or I could do it from a clipboard. I'm going to do it from the clipboard because I think that is really a fantastic way and a great shortcut for loading data. So I'm going to do it from the clipboard. I'm going to input it into my Analyze Portfolio area. And I'm going to go back to that spreadsheet. And I have a set of data here that I want to load. And that data is over a certain period of time and a whole bunch of columns. In fact, there's so many columns here. We go out to AT, so I'm sure you've had even bigger spreadsheets. I think this is about 45 columns across and a couple of rows deep. We're going to load data for this particular portfolio company. Now, I could see here I have the name different, spelled differently in the sheet. So to make sure it's right, every portfolio company has a tracking ID. In this case, this one's number 11. I'm going to load it by highlighting number 11, going all the way across. I won't tap the keyboard 45 times, I promise you. I'll just highlight all those columns across. I hit copy on my keyboard. Now, if I wanted that to be loaded into a new spreadsheet, I would just go to the spreadsheet and hit paste. If I want it in the software, I go to the software and hit paste. I pasted it in. It looks all garbledy-gook in here, but watch this. We hit import. How awesome is that? That's my date. Those are my period. If I go across sign-ups end of the month, paid, and so on. So it mapped all that data from copying it from Excel and pasting it in. I would click import and I'm done. Same analogy in Excel. I would have copied it from one sheet, pasted it in another. But in here, you get a lot more integrity with the data. Now, you might say, well, hey, if one person in my office loads data, how do I know? How do I know if something changed? Well, the way this works is you could have these notifications in the software. And a notification would tell you, for example, if a portfolio company was given access to their own account and they loaded their own data. So I realized maybe on the VC side, very hard because the portfolio companies have many masters. Maybe on the private equity side, you could allow your portfolio company to log in and do that. If they do that, well, you get notification. I'm going to show you an example. So you get an email. This notification is taking place because the name of your portfolio company has indicated that the KPIs for the period are approved and ready for your review. Now, what about the example where we did the grid edit and we changed one record, one field? Well, same thing. You could get a notification there. This is an example, and it indicates the revenue for the period has been changed. And Bob Smith changed it. And he changed it from 2865 to 2866. It gives you a little report of that portfolio company and indicates in red, once again, what changed. Those are notifications that you get. Now, knowing that one company has input their data, or maybe an associate on your team or somebody in finance has input their data is one thing. But what do you do if you have many portfolio companies? Well, there's a great report in here I like to show. It's called our Reporting Package Readiness, and I'm going to select that. And what it shows here in the first column is our portfolio companies. It shows whether we receive their KPI package. These will be your words. Maybe it's performance package or financing package. Whether it's approved and final, approved by your staff, and considered final, whether you did a write-up or any other kind of workflow that you have. Yeses mean it's done, green means you're good, red means nothing's been done. Yellow means it's on its way. So now you have a status report of every portfolio company, every reporting period, and where you stand. And not just whether they've delivered it at the portfolio company, but maybe your staff. So you could add more stages here. These don't necessarily need to be yeses or nos. Those could be dates. And like I said, this is a customizable app, and it gets tailored to your needs. I want to do a couple more day-to-day things to make sure everybody has the feeling about how easy this is. You know, we're stressing the topic of no IT support and kind of high integrity. So let's talk about changing something, doing a little math, adding a field. And I'm going to do that in our financing metrics. So I'm going to come over here to our seed investment for this company. I'm going to look at their record here. Now, in Microsoft Excel, so there's my analogy again. I'm going to go back to Excel, and I'll go back to my data here. If I wanted a new field, so I have class, number of shares, price. If I want a new field, I would insert a column, right mouse click, and do insert. So right mouse click, do insert, and I have a new column. Let's go to the software. If I want a new field, I right mouse click, add a field before this, add a field after this. Feels just like Excel. Now in Excel, let's do another analogy here. This column here has text as its value. This one has date, this one has number, this one has currency, and this one is a formula. Go back to the application. Let's add a field before this. These are fields I have that I'm not showing on the page. Let's do a new field. And a new field I indicate just like in Excel, and look at those values, text, currency, date, and so on. So in here we have even more, things like durations, checkboxes, multiple choices, percentages, users list, files attachments, URLs, emails, phone numbers, addresses, and more. And the address stuff is really neat. You start typing an address, it tells you where it thinks that address is in the world, just like Google would do. It's great, and it saves a lot of time. It's a very modern application. So I wanted to make that analogy, too, that when you have fields in Excel, the software has fields here, too. Now, there's one more thing in Excel I want to point out, a formula. So I have a simple formula here, and this is the amount invested. I click it, it reveals a formula. It's the number of shares times the price per share. Pretty simple formula. We're probably all laughing like, hey, Ben, we live in Microsoft Excel. That's pretty basic stuff. Well, I wanted to show that in the software, too. So let's go to software. And we're going to go to amount invested. I right mouse click again, just like I would have in Excel. And I go to edit the field properties. And look over here. That's the formula. The number of shares times the price per share. Here, do a little analogy there. Kind of feels the same. Number of shares times the price per share, number of shares times the price per share. In Excel, it uses the alphabet. In here, it uses plain language. I want to multiply the number of shares times the price per share. So I wanted to show that to make sure everyone was on the same page about kind of managing the software, managing the tools, creating new fields, uploading data, and more, and kind of the workflow that could work around that, where you come out and you get your notifications that something is done. So that way you're not logging into the application constantly to find out if something's done. It tells you when something was done. And you could put a lot of events around that, where maybe the senior management gets an email only when the entire portfolio is done. there's one more item I want to show, and that's creating a chart. So I mentioned you're going to be spending more time doing analysis and less time assembling the data. And you're going to have a high degree of integrity. So you get more time to do analysis. Why don't we do a chart? So we have all this data, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my reports and charts. Now I have all these reports and charts that I've created, and what I want to do is do my own. I'm going to click New. Look at all the great new stuff we could do. Create tables, summary reports, charts, maps, calendars, timelines. Okay, we're going to stay focused here on chart. So I could name my chart. I could indicate where it's going to go. In this case, I'm going to put that in my food services portfolio. What roles people could be assigned to get that, and the types of charts. Pie, bar, horizontal, and so on. So in this case, I want to look at something over time. So I'm going to hit line, and don't laugh. Yes, we show you what a line chart looks like. So that goes back to that theme of no IT support. We show you what a chart looks like, a line graph. Let's put some values in here. So the x-axis along the bottom, we want that to be time or date. So I'm going to pick date from my available fields. I want to see EBITDA over time. So let's look at EBITDA percent. In the series, the stuff that goes in the middle, I want that to be my holdings, and I'd pick the names of my holdings. If you're looking over here, it actually shows me the holdings that will appear. Now, this presentation today has many different types of companies, oil and gas, food services, software as a service, and more. If I was creating this chart in Excel, so I'm going to go back to Excel, go to my data for a chart. If I was going to do it in Excel, I would need to filter this data because I don't want everything here. So I go to my filters. I pick what portfolio companies I want. I pick what metrics I want to judge them on. So I mentioned earlier that we have data that shows the difference between budgets and target metrics, and then there's KPIs and operating metrics and financing metrics. So we would filter it. So I'd only want my key performance indicators, and it would filter it, and then I would start my charting. That concept of filtering is the same in the software. So if I go back to that chart, I don't want these energy companies in here. I go down, and over here, the word filter, just like Excel, I want to filter those key performance indicators. And in this case, I want to get rid of those target metrics that we set those firms out to be. I don't need to see target metrics in my KPIs. So I want to indicate where it's not selected. And then I don't want to know the differences between the targets. So I select, just like I would in Excel, we're filtering. And then lastly, I only want my portfolio for food services. Now I could filter this out by individual portfolio companies, but in this case, I have like a batch of portfolio companies highlighted as food services. I click Save, and I have my new chart. So I might talk a lot while I'm doing this, but you could see that chart might have taken 2 minutes. Pretty easy. Now I know how particular the partners of a firm can be, and they might say, oh, I don't like these colors, change it, and then the deal associate's stuck picking colors. I just want you to know, you click Customize over here, we're back at that chart, and if the partner of the firm walks in your office says change that color, you click the color over here, you pick his favorite color, I'm going to pick green, and we'll hit Save. And there he goes. Now he has a chart with green on it. So, this is something that I love. I've worked for 12 years working with folks just like you in private equity and venture capital and real estate. And I'm kind of wrapping up on the presentation here and some of the day-to-day tasks, but I think you could see here you could get an enormous amount of value out of this and kind of reduce that spreadsheet shuffle. For those who have stuck around and they have questions about software security and infrastructure and so on, this application, like I mentioned, is on Intuit's QuickBase. So it's in Intuit's environment. It's in the same data centers that run all of those amazing applications like TurboTax and QuickBooks and Mint and more. And it has some of the highest levels of security and infrastructure and availability that I've seen in the market. It's very impressive. It's something we could talk about further. I'm going to wrap up here and take some questions. I think Dee or Brooke has been fielding questions on my behalf as I've been walking through the software, and maybe Dee or Brooke, you could relay some to me, and I could provide some of the answers online with the folks who have stuck around.
Sure, and thank you again, Ben. This is a really great application. I think that people are going to find a lot of use out of it. We do have a couple of questions that have come through so far, and for the folks who are on the line, please feel free to send more in the chat section if you have them. If we don't get to them, we will, of course, email you back after this event with the answers. So please don't feel like you don't have it or you haven't been heard. The first question, Ben, is surrounding pricing. What can you provide regarding pricing, or how is your pricing structured for this product?
Okay, good point. I realize we're in a public setting. First, you'll need an Intuit QuickBase license, their Premier package. So that is actually online. If I go, okay, so their pricing is right here on QuickBase, and you'll have the Premier package, 25 users, $25 a month per user. That's $500. So you'll be licensing QuickBase from Intuit for $500 a month. Now there is a licensing fee on top of that for this custom application. I could share that in a more private setting, and I could say here, it is something also that you could charge on your credit card. There is a one-time setup fee, which is associated with how much work it is and kind of the state of your data. That, too, I would say, is somewhat nominal. And, folks reach out to me. I'll show you my email address in a moment. I could share that with you.
Okay, great. Thank you for that answer. A few more questions. We have about 5 minutes left. The next question is, I noticed the areas to maintain the fund and its investors. Is that included in the main product as well, or is it separate?
Okay, good point. I didn't spend too much time on that. They're referring to this area for funds, and that you can maintain kind of the funds, the properties of the funds, the investors, the investor properties, sharing percentages, and more. All of this is included in the product, so it all comes packaged in. It's not something that's offered separately.
Okay, great. We have about one more question, and again, folks, after this question, if you have follow-up questions, please reach out to Ben directly or send it in the chat form so that we can make sure that he receives those questions. The last question for this webinar and that we have time for is, are there limits to the number of portfolio companies? And regarding price, are there a certain number of portfolio companies in the fee structure?
Okay, I guess that's a pretty good follow-up to that first question about pricing. So it must be on people's minds. There are no limits on the number of portfolio companies. You can maintain as many as you have within that basic fee structure. So we don't charge by portfolio company. If you have 50, that's fine. If you have 500, that's fine. It's all included with a flat monthly fee, and like I mentioned earlier, something that you could likely charge, on your credit card. I've also brought up on the screen for those looking at the screen here, if you want to email me directly, that's my direct email address. I would encourage folks to take a look at the website, reach out to me, and there's also a free 30-day trial. No credit card required there. First name, last name. We do just require a business email address. So sorry for the folks who have Gmails and Hotmails and Yahoos. We do need to have at least a business address there. And that way you could get your hands on the keyboard and kind of click around the product if you want. And I would encourage you to do so. Otherwise, there is me, and I just want to reach out and say thank you to everybody for today's webinar.